I'm Mo Wright, Chair of the Board of CMC Trustees and President Raymond Consulting. It looks so good to see all of you. We welcome you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Today, CMC is honored to premiere the first annual Stephen and Vanessa Marks Legacy Forum featuring our governor. Let's thank Stephen and Vanessa Marks for their sponsorship today. My good colleague on the board. And we have a number of sponsors who are making today's events possible. I will ask you to hold your applause to the end, and they include the Hannah News Service, the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, the OSU Wexner Medical Center, Ohio Health, Mount Carmel Health System, Columbus 2020, and the Columbus Partnership. Let's thank all of our sponsors for their generous support of today's program. So we're going to be in a town hall format today, which means the governor is in charge. Not as if he isn't always in charge, but, and then we'll have a little help from our moderator, my colleague, Carol Looper. We will have the microphone on the floor to start. We'll collect questions and pass them on to our host, and then the question sheets are inside of your forum flyers if you'd like to pose a question for the governor. Now here to introduce our forum is a friend to CMC and our governor, a leader, a thinker, a visionary. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Kwame.
Well, this many people didn't show up when I spoke. I tell you, you must be somebody important. Well, thank you very much for the intro, Mo. I've known the governor now for 20 years. I met him on the balcony of the speaker's balcony in Washington, D.C., and they had just passed a major resolution, and we were up there watching the 1996 Olympics. It was the time that Michael Johnson won the 200 meters, so everyone was kind of in a festive mood. Little did I know that I'd be sitting here 20 years later, a born-again Buckeye, living in the great state of Ohio, and with my friend and the governor, John Kasich. I'm honored to introduce the governor, but I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, how many of you have read the book? Not enough of you. Okay, everyone after this has got to go in that room and go buy a book. He signed them all. And for him to sign, for those, Doug and Jay in the room, you know, for him to sign all those books is a big deal. So please go take a look at it. But I'm going to give you the 5 I's of John Kasich. First I, most important one, integrity. The man does what he says he's going to do. And you see that in the book. He has led a focused, directed a life for these, I won't say how many years. He has great integrity. He's one of these folks, when he says he's going to do something, he does it. The second I, intellect. You may not know this, but he is one of the smartest guys I have ever had the opportunity to work for. I've been able to work for folks like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all these folks that you hear about. This man remembers everything. I'll never forget once, I mean, like the Ohio budget, not only, I mean, he could actually, he knows everything that's in it. More importantly, he'll remember a dessert he ate at a restaurant in New York in 1998. Pistachio ice cream. Okay. Chocolate cake, exactly. I mean, the guy's got an intellect that's amazing. Third, introspection. Here's a man who's accomplished a great deal. He has done fabulous things for the state of Ohio, for his family, for those around him, for those less fortunate, but he's always trying to get better. He's always learning. He's always asking questions. That's the thing I remember so well on that balcony in Washington, D.C. The questions. He asked the best questions of anyone I had ever met. Last actually second to last is impatience. Would anyone agree that he is impatient for the folks that know him? He is a man that's on a mission. You know, I like John, the governor, because what he'll say is, if not now, when? Let's go get it done now. Let's go make it happen. I'll remember we'll be sitting in a cabinet meeting or we'll be sitting in his office and we got to make a decision. He'll bring in, you know, Wayne and Beth and Jay at the time and Scott, and we'll just kind of go on these big old, you know, groups just to go make a decision now. Impatience is a very important thing. And last but not least is he is an inspiration. He is, as you'll read in the book, a great man of faith. I have learned a great deal of him, talking to him, of of all the great things he has learned. And he is a man that is truly an inspiration and inspirational. So it is a great, great pleasure for me to introduce Governor Kasich, my friend, my mentor, and my governor. Thank you very much.
Well, you left out handsome. And here's the thing, Mark. I paid you $1 a year. And after that introduction, I don't think you were worth that. No, that was very... let me just say a couple things here. Doug Price is here. He traveled around with me for 2 years, I guess. I mean, to every place I went, never missed a thing. He's been out on the book tour. I'm headed to Washington today. Briefly, I'll be back tonight for a little thing down in Washington. And also, Doug, if you would stand, and I don't know everybody here, but Jay Shabria, was with me for, I don't know, well over 20 years. Stan Jay, my great friend here. Jeff Polisovsky, the dude, as we call him. Stand up, please. And and my guardian angel, Ron Hartman, Rondo. I always say everybody should have a guardian angel, and he's always been that for me, always encouraging me and supporting me and believing in me. And he just had a birthday, and I'm not going to reveal his age either, but we're both getting older. Now, Mark, okay, so here's the situation. He didn't tell the full story. I was out on the balcony, and I was sort of in charge of it. You know, I was there with Newt, it was Newt's balcony, but you know, Newt's a nerd, we all know that. So I was the guy in charge of the balcony. And Kwame's out there, I don't know who he is, and he's there with a congressman from California, Tom Campbell, who's a legend out there in his own mind. And so he introduces me to Mark, and I said, well, what do you do? Where are you from? He said, well, I live in the Silicon Valley. And I said, so the first thing that I asked him, let's get to the bottom line, are you rich? And he said, yes. And that was my first introduction. Mark came here to create an economic development operation for our state. Excuse me, for some degree it has been, you know, controversial, although I don't even understand it, because now we found, I think it's either in New Zealand or Australia, they're starting to copy our model called Jobs Ohio. See, I never believed that you could do economic development quickly enough through bureaucracy and government. So I believed that you needed to figure out a way to move the operation of economic development to the speed of business, not to the speed of bureaucracy. And over the course of it, we created Jobs Ohio. And what we did is we offered $1.6 billion in debt to New York, and the bonds sold at a very good price. And then the Jobs Ohio, the not-for-profit, bought Ohio's liquor business, although the state still runs that liquor business. The profits pay off the debt, the bonds, and the rest of it is used to hire people who actually, when Jamie Dimon calls, you know, in the old days, they'd have got off the phone, and so he said, well, Jamie Dimon called, and somebody would have said, well, what did she want? Okay, in the new day, we actually know who Jamie Dimon is. And so the bonds sold at a very reasonable price, and the reason it did is because in good times, people drink, and in bad times, people drink more. So we never have any concern about this. And we've hired now about 70 people. Mark moved on because you can't hold him down. He's like, you just can't. He's just a guy that does a zillion things. But we got this thing established, and as a result now, Ohio went from a loss of 350,000 jobs to a gain of now 450,000, approaching 500,000 to the good in our state. And then when you think about the kind of jobs we're getting, when you look at Amazon and their cloud computing, or the IBM data analytics, or you look at GE down in Cincinnati, or I mean, there's so many things that are happening and so much diversification. See, because Ohio has always been sort of a Rust Belt manufacturing place, and when one sector goes down, you get killed. So if you are an investor, a private investor, I would tell you you have to diversify. You have to have stocks, you have to bonds, you have to have large cap, mid cap, small cap. You got to have some ownership in global stocks, because if you don't, if one thing goes down, you get killed. So that's what we've been doing. And Mark is a big reason why we created Jobs Ohio. And we want to strengthen it and keep it going and continue to transform our state. So, Mark, thank you. Thank you for your dedication and for coming here. So the question on everybody's mind is, well, you wrote this book because you want to run for president again. And for those that are hoping that, I hate to disappoint you, but I did not write that book, and nor do I travel, nor do I speak, because I have some ulterior motive here. I am very worried about our country, and I'm very worried about our culture. This book would give you, you're from here, nobody's a prophet in their own home. I knew that long, long ago. But it would give you a little bit of insight in terms of what it is like to actually put together a campaign to run for president of the United States and what it takes to survive and go through so many of the things that I had to go through during that period. But that's just part of this book. This book is deeper than that. It is about how we have arrived at where we are today, which is a pretty polarized and divided society, how we got here, and what we can do to get out of this mess. Because if all we're doing is yelling and screaming and fighting at one another, nothing is going to get done. Now, everybody can say that, but the fact is you really have to do it. And we have a new president, and I have to tell you, I went to see him, after he became president, and gave him some ideas about health care and trade and about a billion things. I was in there a very long time. And I told him a story. I said, when I first became governor, I was like a congressman in a governor's body. And I was wanting to push all these things through. Now, we had a crisis. I mean, we were way in the hole. We had lost so many jobs. It was bad. And so I had to move quickly. But as a congressman, you see, you're not really that much in touch with the reality of what happens on the ground. You really aren't. I mean, you might think you are, but you really are not. Because when you're there, it's sort of theoretical. When you are a governor or a mayor, it's the reality of people. And so over time, I had to come to understand that it was fine to push, but it was also okay to be boring and let your policies be exciting. You don't need to go and say things and, make smart aleck comments, although I always find myself falling back into that from time to time because it's fun for me. But one day my wife came to me and she said, John, you're the governor of Ohio, you're the father of Ohio, why don't you act like it? And it was an important message. And the people of this state, people of this country have changed me, but I have changed, I think, so much for the better from the standpoint of making sure that as a leader, you have to lead, but you have to unify. And at times it can seem a little odd because there's some issues that are just in and of themselves dividing. And it's, I guess, in a way, the way you approach these dividing issues and what your tone is as to how you carry on. But at the end, you want to make sure that everybody in a society has a sense that they have a chance, no matter who they are. And the passion that I have seen develop, not that I didn't have it because I was a kid that came, my mother, was a pioneer in talk radio. Most of you wouldn't know that. When I was a little boy, I would watch my mother listen to the radio, and when the commentator would say something, she would shout at the radio, and that made her a pioneer. But I always felt you have to fight for the underdog. But I have to tell you, over the last, I don't know how many years, I have felt a real heart for people who we walk past, we step over. And in some sense, I'm saddened by those who are struck with mental illness, those who are struck with drug addictions, those who are chronically ill, those who are the working poor who make very little money, and I would just love to wave a wand and make everything good. And by the way, I cannot help get that family in Kirkersville off of my mind. That mom of 6 kids with one coming lost her husband serving all of us. I think I'm so glad the Lord, I think, has given me, it's where it probably has come from, a heart for these kinds of things, which I think makes you a better leader. It doesn't mean you have to be soft. It doesn't mean you have to give up your principles. But it does mean that you have to take into account the feelings and thoughts of everybody. And now, do I get this great? Of course not. I'm short. Sometimes I don't want to be bothered. I mean, when I say the things that we ought to do, doesn't mean I can do them. See, I think you judge a society on the basis of how much time people live a life a little bigger than themselves. So let me give you an example. Most of us, we get up, we go to work, we kiss our spouse or whoever, we go to work, we go home, we have a drink, we eat dinner, and we go to bed. We might watch a little TV, and that's about it. That's our lives generally. But there are times when we live a life a little bigger than ourselves. That's what we're remembered for. We're not remembered for, for title, position, money. I've never been to a funeral where somebody said, boy, that guy was really rich, that made him really great. Or look sometimes they talk about how important they are, but we're all the same. At the end of the day, we're put in a box of the same size, and nobody's any better than anybody else. And I think, though, it's a society that can consistently, the people in it can consistently live a life a little bigger than themselves, recognizing that we fail. That's okay. The other issue I want to talk about before we go to questions, because I don't want to carry on here, is the issue of faith. Now, I believe that we are, and it's kind of consistent with any maturing society, for a society to drift into secularism. And here's what I mean by that. It's when man decides that God, the Creator, needs to be dethroned, and we go on the throne. We're now in charge. And what happens when you do that, in my opinion, is that you move from objective reality to subjective reality. What does that mean? That means that I get to define what's right, and you get to define what's right, and we have no clue what is really right, except on the basis of what we think. And we can be vehement about it, but there's no guiding principle. Think of it this way. So we're out in the woods and we're lost. And I say, well, which way should we go? Who's got a compass? Well, if nobody has a compass, guess what? They'll be having a search party out for us. But if we have a compass, it actually shows us the direction we're supposed to go. And I believe without faith in a higher power, societies get lost. They get confused. The rules sort of fall apart. Now, let's talk about religion for a second. And I said this the other day. My wife and I were walking. I was doing a radio show when we were walking. And I said, in religion, nobody should care about who's anybody sleeping with. She said, what do you mean by that? Well, because too much of religion is about judgment, rules, and, hell, you're going to go to hell if you don't get everything right. That is not, to me, what religion is. Faith in God is something deeper than that. It's about connection, potential, grace, connectiveness, family, and two other things. Love God, which brings about humility, because we're not God. Secondly, love your neighbor like you love yourself. Do you see what's happening in this country? We're yanking somebody off a plane at United Airlines. Wells Fargo is filing false accounts. There are people being told you need to go and do this. EpiPen jacks up their prices to the point where poor families can't even buy the things that they need for their children when they go to school. Politicians in Washington, it's just a vicious fight back and forth. You see, all these things are emblematic of the fact that we're not loving our neighbor or treating our neighbor the way that we want our neighbor to treat us. And when that happens, we start to divide, polarize, and that's not where we can be. Now, if you're a humanist, probably a few humanists here, I'm all for you, because you wake up every day trying to make a better society. But I think in a large country, the absence of religion does not work. And I am fearful that we are drifting. And why do I say that? Well, because when I'm out there, I run into a lot of kids. I love kids, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I talk to them all the time. What do you want to be? Give me a high five. What's your dreams? How do you, blah, blah, blah. Don't do drugs. Blah, blah, all this stuff. And then I say, usually at the end, do you say your prayers? And I have found an increasing number of very small young people looking at me with a blank stare. So that's not helpful. And why am I hopeful about America? Because I think we can reclaim this. And I think we're all sensing this. I went to Munich. John McCain asked me to go over there. I not only went over and did a bunch of things on national security, but had an opportunity to see a lot of business people. In fact, Siemens, which has now invited me to a board meeting in Washington to talk about the future. Siemens is a big company. But everywhere I went, I talked about this. And people said you'd be rejected, and it was just the opposite. I was on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah talking about this, okay? people understand something is amiss and something is wrong. And if we can come together, we'll be strong, and if we stay divided, we're going to be weak, and there's not a bright future. But it's up to each and every one of us. Finally, you matter. There's nobody like you that's ever been born, and nobody that will ever be born like you again. And you have a unique thing, a unique process, a unique purpose in this life, and you need to go and find it. Now, I sound like a preacher, okay, maybe a little bit. Do I get it right? Hell no, I don't get it right. I'm a failure, okay? But that doesn't mean that my words aren't correct. It doesn't mean that my philosophy isn't correct, because I think that it is, even though I am a failure at so much of this. But tomorrow I have a chance to do a little bit better, and hopefully I will. So that's it. I don't think I got a million other things to say, but let me stop.
I would love to ask you a few questions of my own while people are sending in their questions.
Okay.
First question about the book. You talk about us being siloed, and it's pervasive. We're all listening only to the news that we agree with, and we're reading the stories that we agree with, and it is, you say, creating a big divide. Talk about that.
Yeah, there's a couple things that go on. We only read or absorb what we, if we're a liberal, we watch MSNBC, we read the New York Times, we listen to we go to the Huffington Post. If we're a conservative, we watch Fox News, go to the Wall Street Journal editorial page and listen to Rush Limbaugh. And we become vehement. We know the way to run the world. Now, people gave up bowling and took up politics. My suggestion to the country is go back to bowling and forget the politics and turn off the cable television, okay? That's my suggestion. Now, here's the problem. In the past, we have gerrymandering. You know what that means? You know, there's nothing that people know much about government, but they know this word gerrymandering. I don't know how that is. Because you remember they showed you the salamander district. Why did they do that? Well, so that a Republican can't be challenged by a Democrat, and so a Democrat can't be challenged by a Republican. That was what was called a safe district. And now what happens is, you know, now in the days of everybody being so informed, which has its real positives, if you're a Republican, you have to worry about a primary from the right. And if you're a Democrat, you have to worry about a primary from the left. And so what that does is it moves everybody this way. And compromise, by the way, is a horrible word. It works in everything else in our lives, but anything in politics where there's a compromise, you are a sellout. And thank God I don't read Twitter, because it'd probably make my hair stand up for what they say about me, but I don't really care. But the fact is, this is leading to more polarization. So what do we need to do? Everybody needs to absorb 10 minutes of something they don't agree with every day. Secondly, we have to eliminate this business of this redistricting and gerrymandering. We have to come up with a better system to make sure that both parties have an input and we get people more reasonable. And because somebody thinks differently, we don't have to hate them. Yeah, Saturday night, I was out at this with my wife. We went to dinner, and I ran into this big Trump guy, you know, and I went over and talked to him. He's like, people say that I hate you. I said, well, first of all, I don't think you hate me, and secondly, I don't hate you, and I want to reappoint you to something that you're doing a great job with the state. Let's get over. What are we talking about here? Who cares? Think about this. We care about Washington. Does Washington really affect you? I mean, maybe indirectly, maybe in some ways, but you know what really affects you? The people that live in your house and the people that live next door to you. They matter far more to you than some theoretical business down in Washington. Am I right or wrong? I mean, who cares? So let's get over it. And you know what? We also have to find common purpose. And if we find common purpose, what would it be? I'm going to give you one example. You all chuckle when I say to 8, 9, and 10-year-olds don't do drugs. Do you know what the cure is? This drug problem, I mean, we're spending almost $1 billion on this. We've shut down the ability of doctors to prescribe big doses. We have busted more people on the highways. We got everything, and it's good. It was why Medicaid expansion was so important. We have all this going on. The Drug Enforcement Agency told me the other day, I met with them, 28, 30, 32 years, said, what do we do? You know what they said? Start educating kids in kindergarten. Start telling them about the problem of drugs when they're 5 and 6 and 7 years old. You remember how we took drunk driving and turned it into the worst thing you can do? That's what we need to do with drugs, and it's not on somebody else, it's on you. So when you see a kid, you tell them, stay off those drugs because they will kill you. That's how we're going to beat it, and that can bring us together. Fighting opiate abuse or drug addiction is not Republican or Democrat. Feeding poor people, thank God for Kroger and the way they do this business of rounding up. Feeding hungry families is not Republican or Democrat. Fighting human trafficking is not Republican or Democrat. Telling our schools that they got to prepare themselves to educate our kids for the jobs of the future, which we got to get in before I leave. This is what we need to do, and it's not on some politician. It's on you to get these things fixed, and me too. Although since I've been working so hard, I might take a couple years off. We'll see. All right, Carol.
Question about the firing of James Comey. You want to address that?
Who's he?
You watch all the news, so you probably have seen that.
Presidents have a right to fire who they want. I don't think it was very good timing, and I don't think it was handled the right way. But, you know, if I'm the governor, I want to fire somebody, I can fire them. But I got to figure out how I'm going to do it and what's the right way to do it and how do I handle it. And I think, frankly, this probably brings about more attention and more public consciousness than ever before. So I don't think it was handled right, but it's the president's prerogative to hire and fire who he wants.
You say you are worried about our country and worried about our culture. How worried are you about the past, present, and future of our current president?
Well, of course, probably you didn't know this. I did not support him.
You think?
And I didn't go to the convention. Now, let me have you think about this for a second. Because somebody told me the other day in politics that their hands were tied. I said, the only person that ties your hands are you. Now, look, I don't want to be hoisted on a self-righteous petard. That's what I worry about the most. So he's going, look at him, okay, all this talk and, but he's just a fraud. Okay, I'll sign up for that. I'm a fraud, okay? I get it wrong a lot of the time. But, the fact of the matter is that we have to just get ourselves in a position, again, where we're tolerant and not intolerant to one another. If we can do that, we cross the threshold, and we're absolutely fine, Carol.
Do you intend to continue your leadership of the National Federal Balanced Budget Amendment?
Yeah, I think we should have a balanced budget at the federal level to force the congressmen to do their job. Because they don't do their job. They don't do their job, they don't make hard choices, and then they run away. Back, because I didn't make the final point. So I didn't go to the convention, okay? And you know what that was like? People were yelling and screaming, and and what they assumed. I could tell you a really good story. This is a really good one. So I started this when my parents were killed. I started this Bible study here. There's only like 8 of us in it. Tim Bainbridge is one of the guys in it. You didn't have to wave, Tim. What do you want? Okay, wave. Stand up. We give you a round of applause. Great. So there's a minister. He's 89 years old, and he's been a friend of mine for 30 years. And we were talking about the issue of people wanting to be jealous, envy. I said, envy's not, I got lots of things that are my faults, but envy, I'm not a big envy guy, I mean, I do like Blum's house over there on Hoover and all that, but I don't envy it, okay? I don't envy people with their money, or it just is not one of my problems. And the minister looked at me and he said, it must tear out your guts that you're not in the White House. And I said, Reverend, that is a description of you, not a description of me. See, people could not believe that the reason I didn't endorse him is because I just was opposed to the way in which he conducted himself. People thought I was angry and bitter. I've never been more happy. I've never been so damn busy, okay, and more in demand than I am right now. But I didn't do that because I was mad at him. I wasn't going to go to a party where I was going to go and be in a terrible mood, where I couldn't say anything good, and where I wasn't going to contradict myself. So that's why I didn't do it. Now that he's in, I can't root against him. I don't root against any president. How can I root against the president? As I have been fond of saying, and people seem to like it, it's like rooting against the pilot on your airplane, You want him to do well, but frankly, he's got to do better. We've got to be more unifying. I'll tell you one of the things that has to happen, in my opinion. The people around him have to tell him how serious they are about his getting it right. And if they're not going to, if he's not going to listen, then you know what they have to say? I can't work here any longer. You know? Mark wanted to do something. I said, Mark, you can't do it. He said, well, I can't stay then. I said, great. That's great. Great. No. But Mark said, you know, you're giving me responsibility without the authority. I said, I love Mark. He's like a brother to me, okay? I just said, fine. But you have to have people around you who say, no, you can't do that. And if you do that, I can't stay here and support it. Now, it should take a lot to drive you out because loyalty matters, and you don't want to be out there being, you know, just some whiner out here. But he's had to have people that say, I'm serious. We cannot do these things, like what we heard of yesterday. That's not acceptable. But I'm rooting for him. I want him to do well. I want him to change. He's never had a job in politics. A lot of people that have never been in it don't understand it. And now he's president. I mean, you know, think about all of a sudden I make any of you governor. You'd probably do better than I do, but you'd be a little bit afraid of it, right? I'm going to make you governor. It's not simple. So, Carol.
You talk about it in the book. Why did you stay in the race so long?
I thought we could go to, well, first of all, here's the most amazing thing, is that when I went to New Hampshire, right, I thought I was really well known. I'm governor of Ohio 2 terms. I'm Fox News superstar. You know, I was a congressman, high profile, and my name ID in New Hampshire was less than 2%. So I did 106 town hall meetings, and we beat everybody but Trump. The great thing was I won Dixville Notch, which meant early stages I was ahead. And then, you know, I went to New Hampshire, and if they hadn't trashed me in New Hampshire or in Vermont, we would have won there. And then I go south. You know, I go south to South Carolina, where my name ID was less than 1%. I never realized it. We never realized how little. So when I went through the South, like nobody knew me. And we'd get good crowds and good responses, but there wasn't enough. But then when we headed north, we started to see significant changes, like in Michigan. You know, Ohio, people forget. I won Ohio by, I don't know, 13, 14 points, something like that. It was a blowout win. And then I went to the east. I don't know if you know this, but I am the mayor, I am the president of Manhattan. I won Manhattan. Might even have won Trump Tower for all I know. So, I mean, I finished second in all those states. Now, what I thought was we would get to a brokered convention. And then when Cruz got out, you know, and Priebus said, hey, you know, Trump's the nominee, which I didn't like. And so I had to decide whether I was going to continue when I could see the fact that he was going to be the nominee. And I thought, I'm going to lose my message. I got calls from friends, including Jay and Don Tebow and a couple other people, Chris Schrimpf, who worked with me. And I didn't want to lose a message. And a lot of people say, well, you lost. Have I? I don't know. In some ways, I've lost. In some ways, I've won. And so that's why I stayed in.
It seems too common today for candidates to put party first before country. This trend has caused paralysis and kept action from being taken on critical issues. How can we reverse this trend so country comes first?
Well, it's about what you want to be as a person, right? We're back to, you know, your responsibility. You have an obligation. And not, you know, it's to country, but it's really to people. So if you look at a health care legislation moving through the Congress, it's not about, you know, it's really about country, but it's more important, it's about people. Are people going to get what they need? Are people going to get what they want? Can this thing be changed in such a way that we can take care of this thing and then move to fixing fundamental health care? So why am I worried about, you know, being a Republican or a Democrat? So now I'm talking to some Democrats, and I'm finding it's kind of difficult. We reach some basic principles, but the minute we go below that, things start to fall apart. Hopefully, we'll get somewhere. But let me just suggest to you that neither party, at the end of the day, really, in my opinion, really gives a hoot about people who have no power. I just think that's the way I've observed it over the years. You know, if you're poor, if you don't have anything, if you're disenfranchised, if you don't have a lobbyist, if you don't have a voting bloc, they run over you because you don't get heard. And I think it's wrong. And I think that's what causes deeper divisions and hopelessness. And so, and the thing is, you don't want to just give people stuff. We have a program now to take people in need, and we're trying to 16 to 24, and we want to train them. Why don't you just give them their food stamps or whatever they want and let them go out the door? Now it's, why are you here, and what are we going to do to get you out of this mess? And one other thing I want to tell you that you need to just consider, maybe some of you are on the school board, maybe you're close to school board members. Do you understand what's coming our way? I mentioned to you that Siemens is going to have me go to this is one of the biggest corporations in the world. They want me to go down to their board meeting, right, and talk to their board members. Like, that's pretty crazy. And you know why? Because I met the CEO over in Munich. And we were talking together about the coming job tsunami. The #1 job in our country is driving. We're going to have autonomous vehicles. There's not going to be anybody driving. What's going to happen to drivers? I saw this guy yesterday in a FedEx truck. You know, he's got his shorts, got the door open. I'm looking at him. He's happy. He's singing a song. And where's he going to go? And what about drone technology? You know, grocery stores are not going to be with it. You know what Amazon's doing right now. How many people you need in a grocery store? Now that things can be delivered right to your doorstep. Think about the change on that. Think about data analytics. That's going to affect stockbrokers and insurance adjusters and so many people. Watson that you see on TV, that's the future. So the question is, how do you take people who are being hit by this and how do we give them the skills to be dynamic, to be resilient, and to prepare them for the jobs of the future? So I think we're in the process of putting a task force together where I want to get everybody, all the major industries, healthcare, financial services, all these things, and I want them to use a crystal ball, and I want them to say, these are the jobs that are going to be gone, these are the jobs that are going to come, and we need to bend our education system to start giving kids knowledge. Education is getting in the way of learning. Kids need to be out. Cristo Rey, did you see Cristo Rey? Poor kids, they're out in the community. Many of you hire them. 100% of the kids that graduated are going to college. And these are not kids that are coming from Upper Arlington, okay? These are kids that are poor. We need to, this education system is inflexible. There's a lot of good folks. The system itself is not responding. And when you see a tsunami, you know, we see a tsunami over there at that bridge out this window, it's too late. It's too late. I worry about this. If you think that people who were losing their jobs, had coal mine jobs or steel jobs, all voted for Trump, and they all deserted the party and they were for Trump, and they're going to have coal mining jobs and steel jobs. You think that's going to happen? Wait till this tsunami comes. So we need, I feel like Paul Revere. Get the education system to work. Get kids out with you. Let them learn what it is like to work in a business, to have resilience, to know what personal responsibility and manners and all these things are, and give them skills. Tap into what their gifts are. If we don't do this, what are we going to do? Wake up one day and have 20% unemployment? We can't have that. So we have to think about it. But the problem is the education system, both higher and K through 12, are some of the that and the Pentagon are the 3 hardest things to change. And I've been in politics now at the end of my term 30 years, and I'm in a position to say it. They try to figure out how to excuse everything, and change is a dirty word, and it has to become the order of the day. And there are some schools that are getting it, but too many that are not. And they will love this speech.
Last night,
I'm wearing myself out. I got Bernie tonight.
Would you? 9 o'clock, CNN, the governor is debating Bernie Sanders, if you haven't seen or heard that. Tonight, 9 o'clock. Last night, White House spokesman denied that the president shared any classified information with the Russians when they were in his office. This morning, the president tweeted that he did. What are we supposed to believe?
Go back to bowling. I mean, look, it's out. It is what it is. It's a very, very serious matter. And that's why I was saying earlier that the people that are around him have to explain that this kind of information, from what we know, there's always, I always say there's 3 sides to every story, but from what we know, this was not a good thing, because we got this information from a third party. And we don't want to be in a position where the third party gets called out and we don't get additional information on things that can save all of our lives. I'm not sure he understood the gravity of it. I don't know. But we got all these generals in there, Mattis and Kelly and what's his name, McFarland, whatever his name is, that general. He's there, the National Security Advisor. They got to explain this because it's a very serious matter. When you're dealing with sensitive intelligence information, you just can't talk about it.
Do you think there is now a viable case for a third political party in America, a third party comprised of moderates from the Republican and Democratic Party?
Probably not, but I think it's possible for an independent, well-funded, very wealthy person who's articulate, who can chew gum and walk at the same time to run for president and win. I think it's possible. Parties are not what they used to be. Young people are not like saying, well, you know, I got a young Republican meeting tonight, or I'm headed off to the young Democrat meeting. I mean, it's just not happening because the parties are not responding and becoming attractive, full of ideas and excitement. And I think that we're seeing more and more independence, which means that candidates that's, you know, I don't know. I would hope that it would mean that the positions of candidates would override party when the party's candidates leave something to be desired.
Your book has been called a campaign trail memoir, a political biography, and a self-help therapy session. Talk about the book, why you wrote it, and what would you do?
I think I answered that, didn't I?
Well, what would you do differently if you decided
Nothing.
to run again?
Well, wait, that's a presumption. I'm not going there. The press is here. Oh, he's running again. I have no idea what look, the only thing I know about my future is it's ahead of me. That's all I know. And, but I want to tell you this. I don't want to lose my voice. I want to have a voice. I want to be able to be out there commenting, and I think it's helpful. I mean, I think it is. If I didn't think it was, I'd be quiet. And it's really hard for somebody when they leave office to continue to have a voice. I don't know whether I'll continue to have one or not, but you know, I have a little team. We continue to raise money to support that team so I can continue to speak, because you can't just go and be, you know, out there just talking off a cuff. You got to know what you're talking about, and it's hard. So, Carol, I don't know. I mean, it's like finishing a marathon and somebody says, well, what's your strategy for the next one? Well, that's a presumption that you're going to have one.
You talk in the book about the fact that
Can any of them yell, or do you have to moderate this whole thing, Carol?
they can yell. I've got all the questions that were submitted. If anybody else has
Come on, do you have
questions,
any other questions or
bring
things
them
you'd
up.
like to know? Come on.
Bring them up.
Stand up and yell. We have any microphones out there?
You've got it, John.
Well, huh?
It's
Who
on.
else what else would you like to know? Okay, who wants to ask a question? Anybody? Nobody? Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, you know, I never asked the first person that jumps up, so you're out of luck. I learned that in a town hall meeting. Yes, young lady.
So there's a lot going on lately so lately there's a lot of talk in Congress about repealing and replacing
Obamacare, right.
This is something that's really near and dear to me because, like, I struggle with mental illness.
You do.
I have one of my best friends is struggling with cancer, and like I'm terrified of what's going to happen. Like if I were to lose her health insurance, or if she could lose her health insurance. So, what do you think?
Now, do you see what I found?
What do you think Congress should do? What do you think Congress?
Come here, sweetheart. You see what this is?
Andy, he was supposed to do at the beginning.
You see, this is what happened to me everywhere I went. And I don't know why. Who's with this young lady?
I came myself.
Okay, well, somebody's going to talk to you before you get out of here. And, you know, we got to make sure we can help you. So, I don't know, Mark, you get her name, and we got to make sure you get help. And you know, and you have to have help when you have, it's a tough thing. Let's think about this. This young woman walks in here and says, I have mental illness and I need help. I mean, so I was talking yesterday to Senator Portman, and I told him that we're not talking here about some campaign promise or philosophy. We are talking about real people. Now, this young lady is going to need some help. Now, if we give her, Dave, a $3,000 or $4,000 tax credit, what can she get for that? And then what is her deductible? And how can she get to the doctor? And so there's a way in which we can fix this thing, because it does need fixed. We have these insurance companies are getting ready to leave the market, but we have to go about it in a way in which you just don't get things done overnight. In some ways, the Republican dog has caught the car. And now they're beginning to realize this is not easy to do. My concern is they just drive something through, and then they go home and they think, look, this is very, very concerning to me. Can I do any more? I've talked about this on every show all over the country, over and over and over again. And I'm just hoping that the Senate is going to change this thing, and because we can't have this young lady out there with no hope. Where's she going to go? And that's what this is about. That doesn't mean there aren't changes necessary. For example, with Medicaid expansion, which is so important to us, we have a very good match rate, 90-10, but we could, over time, go back to the normal match rate. But we're going to have time, we're going to have some flexibility, and we've got to be able to negotiate, or not negotiate, but have some leverage with the drug companies, because that's our fastest rising costs. Then we got to look over on the other side, and we got to get the federal government out of the insurance business. There's a lot of things that need to be done, but we just can't pull the rug out from under people who have these problems. But you see, what I've figured out about politics is it's not about some philosophy. It's about people. It's about all of us. And if you let ideology or philosophy trump people, I think you lose. Now, some people would say, well, that makes me liberal. Well, no, conservative is giving every single person an opportunity to rise and to realize their fundamental purpose. That's tough, isn't it? And that happened all over the country. And that's why I changed, for the good.
Governor, thank you. We are out of time.
Governor John Kasich, everybody.
Thank you. I just want to say one thing. Just one last thing. I want to thank you all for giving me a chance to be in this job. You know, this is the thing about being a governor is you can move things quickly. Brian is here. He can tell you. He can testify to that. And you gave me a chance. Many of you gave me a chance to do many things in public life, and I really appreciate it. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you around campus, huh? Thank you.
Thank you. As we close today's program quickly, just remember you can always watch all of our events on Columbus Television, on WOSU through PBS affiliates throughout the state, and as well on the CMC website. Join me in thanking our sponsors once again, Stephen and Vanessa Marks, Hannah News Service, the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, OSU Wexner Medical Center, Ohio Health, Mount Carmel Health Systems, Columbus 2020, and the Columbus Partnership. Thank you, Carol, for doing a great job. We'll see you next week. There are books available, signed books in the room adjacent to this one. There are books available next door.